Welcome to Sproutcast, where we speak with changemakers, social innovators, and entrepreneurs about how to make the world a better place. And now, here's your host, Julia Duffy.
Thank you for listening to Sproutcast. My name is Julia Duffy, and today I'm speaking with Helen Barclay, Managing Director of Envira DNA. Envira DNA is a for-purpose business doing exciting things with cutting-edge science, and we chat about the role and value of for-purpose businesses, as well as her organisation's approach to continued innovation. Helen will also be joining us as one of the speakers at Sprout Summit 2017, so listen out for more information at the end of the episode or visit sprouthq.net. Thank you for joining me today, Helen.
Thanks, Julia. I'm looking forward to the chat.
So you manage Envira DNA, which is quite an interesting organisation as the first company in Australia offering a dedicated eDNA service. Could you tell me a little bit more about what Envira DNA does and its origins?
Yeah, so Envira DNA, we've developed a cutting-edge approach to detecting and monitoring animals and plants in waterways. So basically, with a simple drop of water or a simple sample of water, we can detect what is or isn't in a waterway. And this provides a really exciting opportunity for environmental managers, waterway managers, people who are developing and looking to understand where there are threatened species, for example, to be able to very quickly understand what is or isn't there, and also to use the information to help with management decisions. So, for example, if we detect a platypus in a particular waterway, okay, what can we do to help conserve that platypus? Or perhaps we aren't detecting platypus in a waterway, what can we do to help improve the habitat where we know there should be platypuses? So it's about that, providing really important information to help these types of environmental management decisions. And it all comes down to an incredible science called environmental DNA. So essentially any animal or plant, even us humans, are dropping little bits of DNA through our skin cells, on our hair, all the time. And what we've been able to do is actually extract that DNA from environmental samples. So, for example, from a sample of water, and identify what creatures have been in that waterway simply by the DNA that they've left behind. So it's quite scientific and quite technical, but it's really exciting and really important from that environmental management perspective. And there's opportunities also in terms of biosecurity when it comes to monitoring invasive species, for example.
Awesome. Now, I understand that Envira DNA was born out of a profit for purpose mentality. Could you tell me a little bit more about what that approach means to you and how you live those values within the organisation?
Definitely. So I'm personally very passionate about the for-purpose business space. It's something that probably for the last 10 years or so, I've started to learn a lot more about the space and just know it's the area that I want to be operating in. And I've done a range of different bits and bobs here and there to, I guess, really throw myself at this area. And I think, to me, when I think about, the challenges that we have in society and regarding the environment, and there's a lot of effort out there, there's a lot of people out there in different capacities, from an activism perspective, for example, from a not-for-profit perspective. So that's kind of at sort of one end of the scale, trying to help with these societal and environmental issues. And then at the other end, we have governments also trying to play their part here and there. But I think where the power really lies in addressing these types of issues is in business, just because the way the world goes is that we're run by money, and we're really based on that capitalistic, mindset. And there is, while there's a lot of, negative connotations to that, there is a lot of power in it. And I really believe in using business as a force for good. So for me, I guess, the last 10 years, I've been trying to find what those opportunities are for me to get engaged in this movement. And when I found out about B Corp, when B Corp hit Australian shores, I don't know if it was 5 years ago or something like that, that for me articulated what I was interested in doing in terms of, using business as a force for good. It gave a framework for my thinking. And, from that point, I guess I've wanted to work for businesses that have that purpose as a forefront of what they're about. and, one day run my own for-purpose business, which is where I'm at. Yeah, so I guess, for me, it is really core using business as a force for good. And in terms of Envira DNA actually spun out of another environmental organisation, which is called CESA. And CESA, I actually worked for CESA. So this kind of is an interesting sort of circle that I've circled back here. So CESA, I started working for CESA as a part-time bookkeeper, actually. When I finished uni, I studied entrepreneurship and I decided, I want to do good stuff in the world and I want to use my business skills to do good stuff. So I was just throwing myself at the industry in terms of volunteering. I volunteered for transition towns in Hawthorne, and I ran an initiative called Carrot Mob, which was all about using the consumer dollar as a force for good to encourage businesses to have more sustainable practices. And I was just trying to find my space in this world of wanting to help the environment. And I came across just this simple opportunity, which was part-time bookkeeper, admin assistant for this environmental consultancy, and I got the job there, and I was with CESA, eventually became full-time and worked with CESA for about 4 or so years. And then I moved on from CESA and went to work in the innovation creativity space and have since circled back to that environmental space. And I'm actually collaborating with the directors of CESA, who were my previous bosses. I'm now in partnership with them starting Envira DNA. So I guess from an interesting one, I was only thinking about it the other day actually, where I was like, yeah, wow, I was a part-time bookkeeper working for these guys and now I'm in partnership with them starting another for-purpose business with Envira DNA. So that's a bit of the background in terms of, I guess, my passion for business as a force for good, how I've, got into that space and sort of how Envira DNA started.
Excellent. And could you talk about some of the values involved in what Envira DNA does and I guess how you make decisions within the business that are perhaps related to that way of thinking?
Yeah, definitely. Because we're, still at this sort of beginning of our business, it's actually a great opportunity to instill the sort of values that we want to have. So we're at a process at the moment where we're really trying to articulate what they are and have them as something as we grow and have staff join us that reflect truly what we believe in as directors, that staff can also connect with, and very much centred around not only around, I guess, having a purpose and doing good as a business, but also values around how we operate as a business. And that's something that's also really important, obviously, in terms of thinking about, okay, well, what is our carbon footprint, for example? Sure, we're out there doing all of this fantastic work in terms of trying to save threatened species or provide really key monitoring that can support the management of waterways and environment. But how are we operating as a business, and are we operating environmentally sustainably? And are we also operating in terms of being the best place to work for our employees? And are they happy, and are they healthy, and are they feeling fulfilled in their work and growing? So all of these kinds of things I'm really passionate about, and I'm particularly passionate about the environment, but I'm very much a people person, and I really believe in enjoying what you do and enjoying coming to work. And I'm excited to build a workplace where hopefully we can have that as we grow. As I said, we're still fairly new and we'll have greater opportunity to instill those kinds of practices as we go.
Awesome. And you mentioned earlier the B Corp model and that you're quite a fan, and we've had a few people on the podcast talk about it. So I always like to ask, I guess, what your experiences of the model has been and why and what you like about it.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember when I first heard about B Corp. I can't remember where I heard about it, but I went along to a breakfast where it was, introducing the concept of B Corp and thought this was fantastic. And at the time, I really wanted the environmental consultancy I was working with to become a B Corp. So I looked into it and other priorities got in the way. And then I moved into that innovation creativity space where I worked with Inventium. And Amantha Imber, who's the founder and CEO of Inventium, is also very much a purpose-driven person. So we talked about B Corp and both were really passionate to see it happen for Inventium. So we actually drove the process of Inventium becoming a B Corp. So that was my first experience really, I guess, helping to make it happen for a business and really getting to see all the ins and outs of the B Corp process. It's quite an involved, I guess, assessment that you go through, and it's really rigorous, which I thought, well, that's great, because the last thing I want to have is any Joe Blow getting a B Corp certification. And yeah, it just, you know, the line is that B Corp is to business what fair trade is to coffee. And so I love the fact that we can build that kind of a new way of looking at business. I feel that this brings me on to another topic that I was interested in talking about. You know, I think that business, obviously, I mean, it has a really, as I said before, negative connotations. It can be a dirty vibe. And that's something that I found quite interesting with particularly working with Enviro DNA and a previous environmental consultancy, is that we're out there doing all this great work, but often people just think, oh, you're a business, you know, you're obviously just trying to make money. We want to take our money elsewhere and we're going to support not-for-profits, or, you know, there's not-for-profits out doing similar work to you as a business, so we'd rather our money go to not-for-profits, for example. So I just like the idea of, I really, as I said, believe business as a force for good. There's a lot of good things about business from the perspective of how we manage ourselves and how we make stuff happen, how we work with urgency, how we work with passionate people. And there's a lot of good frameworks that actually make outcomes happen in business, which is what we need when it comes to addressing environmental and social issues. So B Corp, I love the idea that perhaps we can start to change people's perceptions of those businesses that are B Corp certified. And I think that's important if we're going to be able to use business as a force for good.
Excellent. It's really interesting, your comment about people preferring to work with charities or not-for-profits. And I think it's very interesting to kind of think about how perhaps they have a monopoly on the idea of altruism within the work that they do. But I mean, in some cases, they're maybe not doing it the most effective way, or there are opportunities that businesses can pursue that not-for-profits can't. And when I talk with not-for-profit guests or guests from not-for-profits on the podcast, we often talk about how they share the message of their organization's mission and what they're doing and get community involvement. Is that something that you think about in terms of kind of changing perceptions?
I guess at the moment, you know, our business, and I think there is opportunities in the future for citizen science with Enviro DNA, and we've done a couple of little bits and bobs with it. But at the moment, our primary customers, we're in the B2B, so business to business and business to government space. So in my mind, I guess, you know, immediately it's thinking about how do we influence our clients and our industry to be understanding business as a force for good and what that means. So I suppose that's probably my initial thought, but I do love the idea of, you know, how do we create a movement in terms of people understanding what business as a force for good means. And I think B Corp is very much about making that happen and having that very clear certification around it and starting the dialogue and having language around it. So I think it's B Corp that is the kind of like flagship driving, you know, that whole thing of having people look at a business that's certified and go, oh, cool, okay, well, you know, they're also doing good, you know, just like a not-for-profit, they're also doing good. So I think B Corp is a really key part of it. And from my perspective, in terms of thinking of Enviro DNA and influencing the business clients that we have and the government clients that we have, is just raising the profile of what it means to do business as a force for good. And that can mean getting B Corp certification and helping to explain that to our clients, you know, talking about it with our clients, having it on our website, you know, through our material, whether we develop videos or whatever, just having the messages come through. So I'm definitely, all for raising the profile of business as a force for good in our industry.
Now, another aspect of the B Corp model and the B Corp idea is, I guess, potentially working towards there being a legal framework for this type of organisation. Is this something that you've thought about much yourself, or what's your interest in that area?
Definitely, yes. I've heard that the people of the B Corp space are lobbying in Canberra to get the legislation changed so that we now have benefit company legislation. So when a new business wants to start up and if they want to go ahead and become a company, will they choose between becoming a company or a benefit company? And the benefit company is about not only having responsibility to the shareholder, which at the moment is what a company has, it also has responsibility to the environment and to people. And I just think that will just totally change the landscape, and it will also help, I guess, change people's perceptions in regards to business as a force for good. So I think not only will it raise the profile, but it will allow businesses who truly want to do good, make sure that they can do good without risk of being sued by their shareholders, which can potentially be the case in existing companies' structures.
And what type of mechanisms for measuring the benefit that the company is providing do you think would be appropriate? I know this is something that I guess is kind of uncertain about this area. Do you have any thoughts on how the good that the business is generating could be measured?
Yeah, and that's such a challenging one. Measuring the impact, the positive impact, I think can be quite challenging, and I imagine that we can probably learn a lot from the not-for-profit space in terms of, how they report on their positive impact that they've been having. So I don't really know. I know that it's an area that, we need to be thinking about from Envira DNA's perspective in terms of how do we quantify, the impact that we're having. And it's no simple answer. And I've found that that's the case for a lot of organisations. You guys may have interviewed before Mike Davis from Purposeful. I think that he is doing quite a lot of work in this space. And I'm excited to sort of perhaps one day connect with him. I actually haven't connected with him yet to have more of a conversation about what that could look like for us.
Excellent. Well, I guess that's the challenging but exciting aspect of that, really.
Exactly.
And presents opportunities not just for improving the way we're doing things now, but improving or innovating into different areas, really.
Yeah, definitely. And then also being able to articulate it and tell the story to others to help, build the profile of the good that's being done is so important.
Now, I'm particularly interested in, I guess, the innovative aspect of that, and particularly its scientific nature, because I know innovation and using it to change the way people work and the way businesses operate is really popular language that's being used in all areas of business at the moment. But I know you've been involved, I guess, in taking a more scientific approach to innovation with groups such as Inventium, and that's clearly what's been the case in Envira DNA. I was hoping you could tell us a little bit more about your thoughts on this side to innovation.
Yeah, definitely. So the way that I have learned to define innovation is by my experience at Inventium, which is any change that adds value. Really simple definition and all-encompassing. So it could be a small change, an incremental type innovation, or it could be something more breakthrough and more dramatic. So in this instance, what we're doing in Envira DNA and the approaches that we've developed in terms of essentially what is cutting-edge monitoring, species monitoring in waterways, we're helping to innovate how people go about identifying where species are and where species aren't, particularly when we're looking at waterways. So there are existing methods. For example, if we go back to the platypus, setting nets is one of my colleagues has done this quite a lot, where he sets up spike nets overnight in a particular area, and he goes and checks the nets all throughout the night to see whether he's captured a platypus. And it's all good. The platypus is fine. He just basically notes that we've captured a platypus, measures the platypus, and puts the platypus back. This is a very laborious process. You have to set the nets up. You're out all night. It's cold. And sometimes platypuses are pretty smart. They can evade nets as well. So just as a very specific example I'm giving you here is how we're helping to innovate this way of detecting species. So with eDNA, we're able to just take a sample of water and very quickly be able to determine, is there a platypus in that waterway or isn't there? And we can take that sample of water at any time of the day, and it can take 5 minutes to get a sample of water from a given location, and then it's off to the lab for analysis. So I guess that's an example of innovating how a traditional species monitoring technique is currently happening to make it easier, to make it quicker, to make it something that organisations can more readily implement. Sometimes organisations have to make management decisions about the environment without having all of the data to help them understand what is and isn't there. So that's just one specific example of, I guess, how eDNA is an innovation and helping to improve how monitoring is conducted when it comes to species detection.
And can you think of any different examples, perhaps where the scientific approach to innovation is not as clear, not as obvious a step as a kind of more scientific field it might be?
Yeah, sure. So are you talking about, where we might have innovation within a corporate organisation where it's not science-based?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
kind of surprising. Yeah.
Yep. I guess going back to that definition of change that adds value being really what innovation's all about, that means that it's not saying that it's just innovation within a product sense or a technical sense or a science type of sense. We can have innovation in organisations from a whole number of other ways, such as innovating how we market our product or service and ourselves, or innovating processes in terms of how we run and manage our business, innovating how we recruit people, innovating how we might be positioning ourselves in the marketplace. So I guess, from a general perspective, innovation certainly spans well beyond those kind of really exciting scientific discoveries.
And I guess another key part of innovation is continuing to innovate, not just making one change and then perhaps being left behind by the rest of the industry or something like that. So I'm wondering, with your approach in Envira DNA, how you address continuing to innovate and continuing to find new opportunities.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as a new organisation, you're certainly at the cusp of that innovative energy. And we're only, we've really been running for a very short time, about 6 months. So we're very much still immersed in trying to work out what are the best ways that we can apply this amazing eDNA science and technology. So while we are applying it for some of our clients at the moment, there's still a lot more opportunities for us to develop the science and develop the application of it, thinking about different ways that we can package it. So particularly when we look at, I mentioned briefly before, biodiversity assessments, where we can take a sample of water and we can determine all of the different species that are in that waterway. And, how do we package that as a service, if you like, to organisations that are going to find that really useful? So we're definitely in the space of really thinking about, how can we really make this happen, even though we're currently making it happen. And there's lots of opportunities. We're even looking at, for example, citizen science and how we engage people in the community that are really passionate about science and about their local environment. And eDNA poses a great citizen science opportunity where people can actually go and take samples potentially in their local waterways. So there's a lot of opportunities. And for us at the moment, it's about, let's get our core down pat, and we're focusing on where we have existing contacts and relationships and expertise. And at the same time as getting that core part of our business really running well, it's thinking about new industries and new possibilities at the same time, because the last thing you want to do is rest on your laurels. Not that we are, because we're only 6 months in, but I think for a lot of bigger organisations that do already have a great success story behind them, it's very easy to rest on your laurels. And so, a lot of what we did at Inventium, when I was working with Inventium, was working with corporates to think about, okay, how are we going to innovate our core business? And how are we also going to focus on our non-core type of business where we think there could be opportunities. And, you know, from what I've learned there and sort of what I'm pulling into what I'm doing at the moment is setting what we call innovation missions, where you basically determine where do we think there is an opportunity for innovation for our organisation, where do we want to focus our innovation efforts, and let's make sure that we continue to have this on the agenda and we look at taking that through a particular process, if you like, an innovation process. So it's not just something that randomly pops up and, you know, on the agenda, oh, have you guys looked into that wastewater opportunity? Oh, no, we haven't had time yet. You know, we actually implementing processes around facilitating us through an innovation process.
Excellent. Now, before I let you go, I always like to ask my guests if they can give a shout out to someone or something or an organisation that they feel is doing something really inspirational or interesting in the sector that we might not know about.
Yeah, definitely. So I actually just came across an organisation called Goodsmiths, and they actually ran an event that I went to recently at Donkey Wheel House as part of the Small Business Victoria Festival, where it was a day of talking about social enterprise, of purpose business and what's the landscape like and how do we better navigate it, how do we, you know, gain traction as purpose businesses or social enterprises. So Goodsmiths ran that event, and that sort of is how I found out about them. And if you jump on their website, they actually have curated a whole lot of different products and services that consumers can buy, which are from companies that are doing good. So from social enterprises, from purpose businesses. So it's basically about using the power of the consumer dollar, which I really firmly believe that we should be doing. And you can go on there, you can have a look at, you know, you might want to buy a gift for someone, so you can have a look at their curated selection of suppliers of gifts. You know, if you're going to be buying a gift anyway, you may as well buy it from an organisation that is an ethical organisation, for example. So definitely a shout out to Goodsmiths.
Awesome. Excellent. And before we let you go, Helen, where can people find you or find Envira DNA online if they want to learn more about what you do?
Cool. Yep. So it's enviradna.com. You can contact me on my email, which is hbarclay@enviradna.com, and also reach out to me on LinkedIn and connect, and would love to connect with other like-minded people. At the moment, I'm just really throwing myself into the space, and it's really energizing being able to, I guess, build a network in this area of doing good. So thanks for having me, Julia. It's been great chatting.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to have you on the show.
Awesome. Thank you.
And you can hear more about for-purpose businesses from Helen Barclay at Sprout Summit 2017. Either attend online from wherever you are in the world, or join us in person in Melbourne on the 12th of October 2017. We'll be featuring an amazing lineup of speakers with experience starting some of Australia's most innovative not-for-profits, social enterprises and for-purpose businesses. Find out more at sprouthq.net.
Did you enjoy this episode of Sproutcast? Visit sproutcast.net to sign up for our newsletter. The newsletter includes copies of the show notes and additional content from each episode.